and I'm playing Hannah Ferguson. And I was raised in a town called Palos Verdes Estates, California. It's right on the ocean, so it's sort of a beach bunny. It wasn't a very big town. There were only 2 shopping centers when we lived there, and they were kind of small, just a little plaza. And another place that had a toy store that I would save up my allowance money and go buy doll clothes and stuff like that. And the school was right on the edge of the ocean, so we would just walk down, and our science classes would be walking through the actual tide pools and trying to pry off abalone off the rocks, that kind of thing. It was kind of fun. Cool. And my dad worked in the town, so he was home every day for lunch. I don't know how marriages can handle that, but anyway, he was there. And the grocery store, and this is sort of showing my age, but it was a small grocery store. I believe it was before the supermarket. And you walked in and you just picked out what you wanted, and then you signed your name. At the end of the month, you'd get a bill. So there was no check writing, or I don't even think there were credit cards back then, maybe the diner's card or something. And we had a bread man. And so this is, again, showing my age, but he was the Helms Bakery man. And if you wanted him to stop in front of your house, you'd put an H in the window and he'd stop. And this beautiful truck, and he'd pull up in the back. And these beautiful, beautiful wooden trays full of breads and rolls and donuts. And it was great. It was a fun thing for us to do, to greet the Helms Bakery man. And there really wasn't like a restaurant or anything that I can even remember in town, believe it or not. So we would go to this little pizza place in the next town over called Hollywood Riviera. And spent a lot of time on the beach. On my skin shows that I was on the beach a lot. Lots of our friends would go and spend all afternoon there in the summers, and have a whole bunch of towels that the girls would sit on, and then a bunch of towels that the boys would sit on. We'd go body surfing. At the time we used the big rubber rafts before the heat ones. Lots of time doing that. I was very active in my high school. Cheerleader, acting, course, speech, choirs, that kind of thing. So that's why I can't type. And it was a fun place to grow up. I did get to go back to my high school reunion, my 40th. And my house was gone, and in its place was a pretty big place. And the trees, it was kind of a shock. We had moved to a newer section of the town, and the trees are now, of course, 30, 40 feet tall, so that was kind of fun to see. Kind of fun to drive back and see it again. And there was a road that on the way down to the middle school and down to the church, it's not there anymore. It just eroded off the edge of the cliff. So it was kind of funny to think that whole place that we used to drive isn't there anymore. Yeah, it was a good place to grow up.
I'm Jeannie Shubitz, and I am playing the role of Shelby in the Spitfire Grill. And I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, so just an hour and a half south of here. So I had a very typical suburban childhood growing up, nothing uncommon. So rather than talking about Tucson, I would like to talk about where I spent my summers growing up, which is in Ely, Minnesota, which is in the Northwoods, right up against the Boundary Waters, which I think of so much in the context of this show because they talk so much about Gilead and how it's this little small town set apart, and you can walk for miles and never leave the trees and just be surrounded by the wilderness. And it makes me think so much of this little town because it backs up specifically against the Boundary Waters canoeing area, where there are no roads. It is just nothing but wide open wilderness, and it is just the most beautiful country, and I feel so tied to it because it's also where both of my parents grew up in northern Minnesota. So my summers there growing up were just fantastic. There's a sense of freedom living in a small town like that because you don't have any real concerns because everybody knows everyone, which can be a mixed bag. But we would just leave and go and be outside for the whole day and not show up again until dinner time. And there was really never any sense of concern because really how much trouble are you going to get into in this tiny little town in the woods? And there's a little family run grocery store that's still there, still running to this day, called Zoops. And it was there when my mom was growing up, and it was there all through my childhood, and I still go back. They make their own sausage in the back. It's crazy, and the most delicious stuff ever. And you can walk the perimeter of the town in a half hour, And there were just little cute, independently owned shops along the main drag, and there was like an A&W and a Dairy Queen, which was like the place to go on a Friday night. As you can tell, it's a pretty hopping place. And a bowling alley with a bar in it, and everybody knows everybody, and if you walk in and people don't know you, it's kind of like the action stops and all heads turn and look at you, and you're like, hey, I'm the stranger. So it's very, very similar to the way Gilead is structured in the show. And my family ran a resort up there, so I just spent my summers going there and running and playing in the woods and picking blueberries and playing in the lake and going swimming. And it was a very beautiful, simple way to live. And it was a nice escape from what I lived with the rest of the year in Tucson.